The stagecoach wheels snapped clean off on a rutted stretch of New Mexico road 3 miles outside Hot Springs, and Julia Edwards knew immediately that her already precarious situation had just become dire. It was August 1878, and the merciless sun beat down on the disabled coach like a hammer on an anvil. The driver, a grizzled man named Pete who had spoken maybe 10 words to her since Albuquerque, stood examining the broken wheel with the kind of grim expression that promised no good news. Julia climbed down from the coach, her travel-worn burgundy dress catching on the doorframe. She had been wearing the same outfit for 3 days, and the dust of the territory had worked its way into every fiber. "How bad is it?" she asked, though she could see perfectly well that the wheel was beyond repair. The wooden spokes had shattered, probably weakened by the dry heat and finally giving way on the rough terrain. Pete spat tobacco juice onto the cracked earth. "Bad enough. We are stuck until I can get back to town and bring a replacement. That is going to take most of the day, maybe into evening." "I could walk," Julia said, shielding her eyes against the sun as she looked toward where Hot Springs should be, somewhere beyond the shimmering heat waves. "I would not recommend it, Miss Edwards. Not alone. Not out here." Pete's tone carried a warning that made her stomach clench. She had heard enough stories about what happened to women traveling alone in the territories. The frontier had teeth and it showed them often. "Then what do you suggest?" "I suggest you stay with the coach while I take one of the horses back to town. Keep yourself in the shade, ration the water." He paused, studying her face. "You running from something or running to something?" Julia considered the question. "Does it matter?" "Might do. If you are running from something, staying put in one place might not be wise." "I am running to something," she said firmly, though the truth was more complicated. She was traveling to Hot Springs to meet her late brother's business partner, a man named Samuel Prescott, who had written to inform her of Thomas's death in a mining accident 6 months prior. Mr. Prescott had mentioned that Thomas had a stake in a general store, and that Julia, as his only living relative, might have an interest in the property. It was not much, but it was more than she had back in St. Louis, where her employment as a seamstress barely kept her fed, and where the man she had been promised to had suddenly married someone else, someone with better prospects and a larger dowry. Pete nodded slowly. "All right then. You sit tight. I will be back before dark." He unhitched one of the horses, a sturdy bay mare, and swung himself up with surprising agility for a man of his years. "Keep the pistol I saw in your bag close. Fire it if you need help. Sound carries out here." Then he was gone, and Julia was alone with the broken coach and one remaining horse, which eyed her with what seemed like skepticism. She retrieved her carpet bag from inside the coach and settled herself in what little shade the vehicle provided. The canteen Pete had left contained perhaps 2 days' worth of water if she was careful. She took a small sip, letting it wet her parched mouth, and tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong. An hour passed. Then another. The sun climbed higher, and the shade from the coach shifted. Julia moved with it, her back against the wheel that still remained intact. She attempted to read from the small book of poetry she had packed, but the words swam before her eyes in the heat. Instead, she found herself dozing fitfully, dreaming of Thomas as he had been when they were children in Ohio, before their parents died, before the world had scattered them like seeds on the wind. She woke to the sound of hoofbeats. For a moment, hope surged through her. Pete had returned quickly, perhaps found help closer than expected. But as she shaded her eyes and looked toward the sound, she realized it was not one horse but several, and they were coming from the wrong direction. 3 men rode up to the disabled coach, and Julia felt her mouth go dry with fear that had nothing to do with the heat. They were rough-looking, unshaven, their clothes worn and stained. The kind of men her mother had warned her about, back when her mother was still alive to offer warnings. "Well now," said the first man, a heavy-set fellow with a scar running down his left cheek. "What do we have here?" Julia stood, keeping her hand near her carpet bag where the small pistol rested. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. I have had some trouble with the coach. The driver has gone for help." "Has he now?" The scarred man looked at his companions, all three sharing a smile that made Julia's skin crawl. "That is unfortunate. Leaving a lady all alone out here, that is not very gentlemanly." "He will be back soon," Julia said, trying to keep her voice steady, "with others from town." "Hot Springs is 3 miles that way," said the second man, younger than the first but with cruel eyes. "That is a fair distance. Lots can happen in the time it takes to ride 3 miles. The third man, thin as a rail with a nervous twitch, just stared at her in a way that made her want to scrub her skin clean. "I have nothing of value," Julia said, which was mostly true. The few dollars she had were hidden in her boot, and her only jewelry was her mother's simple wedding band, which she wore on a chain around her neck, hidden beneath her dress. "I do not know about that," said the scarred man, dismounting. The other two followed his lead. "A woman alone out here, that is valuable in itself. Lonely territory, you understand. Man gets lonely." Julia's hand closed around the butt of the pistol in her bag. "Stay back. I am armed." This made them laugh, which she had expected, but she pulled the pistol free anyway. A small Derringer that her brother had given her years ago. It held 2 shots and was accurate to maybe 10 feet if she was lucky. "Now that is not very friendly," said the scarred man, still advancing. "We just want to talk." "I said stay back." Julia cocked the hammer, and the sound seemed very loud in the empty landscape. The man stopped, his smile fading into something harder. "You going to shoot all 3 of us with that little toy? I do not think so, sweetheart." "Maybe not," said a new voice, deep and calm, "but this Winchester will drop all 3 of you before you take another step." Everyone froze. Julia's eyes darted to the source of the voice and found a man on horseback about 30 yards away. He must have approached from behind the coach while everyone's attention was focused elsewhere. He sat easy in the saddle, a tall figure in dusty trail clothes, a dark hat pulled low over his eyes. The rifle in his hands was indeed a Winchester, and it was pointed steadily at the 3 men. "This is not your business, friend," said the scarred man, but his voice had lost its confidence. "I am making it my business," said the stranger. He nudged his horse forward closer. Julia could see him better now. He was perhaps 30 years old, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' growth of beard, and eyes that were a startling blue-gray even in the harsh sunlight. "You boys have 2 choices. You can ride away right now, or you can see how fast I can work this lever action. I am pretty fast." 3 against 1, said the young man with cruel eyes. "I like those odds. Do you?" The stranger's voice remained conversational. "Thing is, I will shoot you first because you are stupid enough to go for that gun on your hip. Then I will shoot your friend there, the skinny one, because he looks like he might run, and I hate shooting people in the back. Then I will shoot your leader, and he knows I will because he is the only one smart enough to understand that I am not bluffing." The moment stretched out, tense as a rope about to snap. Julia held her breath, her own pistol still raised, though her arm was beginning to tremble from the strain and the fear. The scarred man broke first. "This is not worth dying over. Let us go, boys." "Smart choice," said the stranger as the 3 men remounted their horses. "And gentlemen, if I see you in Hot Springs, if I even catch wind that you are anywhere near this lady again, We will finish this conversation in a way you will not enjoy." The three men rode off, heading south into the wasteland. The stranger watched them until they were out of sight, then finally lowered his rifle and looked at Julia. "You can put that down now," he said gently, nodding at her pistol. Julia realized she was still aiming it, though at nothing in particular. Her hands were shaking badly now that the immediate danger had passed. She carefully uncocked the derringer and lowered it, nearly dropping it in the process. "Thank you," she managed. "I do not know what would have happened if you had not come along." "I have a fair idea," he said, dismounting. His horse was a big chestnut gelding, well cared for from the look of it. "Nothing good, you hurt?" "No, just frightened," he nodded. "That is normal. Fear keeps you alive out here." He tipped his hat. "Name is Ryder Kane. I was heading to Hot Springs myself when I saw your coach from the ridge back there. Figured something was wrong when I saw it just sitting here." "Julia Edwards. The wheel broke. The driver went for help. Pete Foster." At her nod, Ryder smiled slightly. "He will be back, but not before sundown, I would wager. He is a good man, but not quick. You waiting here alone all day is not a good idea, as we just saw." "I do not have much choice." "Sure you do. You can ride with me into town. Your baggage will be safe enough with the coach, and Pete will bring it when he comes back with the new wheel." Julia hesitated. She knew it was not proper to ride off with a strange man, but then again, very little about her current situation was proper. And Ryder Kane had just saved her from a fate she did not want to contemplate. "I do not want to be a burden," she said. "No burden. My horse can carry double for 3 miles easy. Besides, a woman traveling alone to Hot Springs is bound to be running to something or from something, and either way, you will need friends in town. I am offering to be one." There was something about his manner that put her at ease, a straightforward honesty that seemed at odds with the harsh landscape. Julia made her decision. "All right. Thank you, Mr. Kane. Just Ryder is fine. Mr. Kane makes me sound like my father, and we did not get along." He secured his rifle back in its saddle scabbard and then offered his hand to help her up. "You ever ridden double before?" "Not since I was a child." "It is simple enough. You will ride behind me, hold on to my waist. The saddle will be a tight fit, but it is not far." Julia took his hand, surprised by the callous strength of it, and let him help her up onto the chestnut. He swung up in front of her with easy grace, settling into the saddle. Julia hesitantly placed her hands on his waist, feeling awkward and very aware of the impropriety of the situation. "You will want to hold tighter than that," Ryder said, glancing back at her. "I will not bite, I promise." Feeling her face flush, Julia gripped his waist more firmly. She could feel the solid muscle beneath his shirt, the warmth of him through the fabric. The horse started moving, and she instinctively tightened her hold. They rode in silence for a while, the landscape rolling past in shades of brown and gold and rust red. The Sangre de Cristo Mountains rose in the distance, purple against the bright sky. Despite everything, Julia found herself appreciating the wild beauty of it. St. Louis had been gray and crowded and suffocating. This land was harsh, but it was honest about its harshness. "So what brings you to Hot Springs?" Ryder asked after a while, his voice easy as if they were old acquaintances rather than strangers. "My brother had some property here. He died 6 months ago. I am coming to see what he left behind." "I am sorry for your loss. What was your brother's name?" "Thomas Edwards." "He had a stake in a general store, or so I was told." "Prescott's place," Ryder said immediately. "I knew Thomas, not well but enough to buy him a drink now and then. He was a decent man. His death was a shame." Julia felt a tightness in her chest. "You knew him, like I said, not well." But in a town the size of Hot Springs, everyone knows everyone after a while. Thomas was well liked, Always had a kind word. I was sorry to hear about the accident. What happened exactly? The letter I received was short on details. Ryder was quiet for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. There was a collapse at one of the silver mines up in the hills. Thomas and 3 other men did not make it out. It was not suffering, if that is any comfort. It was quick. Julia closed her eyes briefly, letting the grief wash over her again. She had cried herself dry in the weeks after receiving Mr. Prescott's letter, but the pain was still there, a dull ache that never quite went away. Thomas had been 5 years older, her protector after their parents died, the one who made sure she had food and a place to sleep even when he barely had anything himself. Then he had gone west seeking his fortune, and she had stayed behind, trying to make her own way. She had not seen him in 4 years. "It is some comfort," she said quietly. "Thank you for telling me." They rode on. Gradually, signs of civilization began to appear. A fence here, a few cattle there, and finally the town itself, sprawling along a dusty main street with the hot springs that gave it its name visible as wisps of steam rising from pools at the far end. It was not a large town, maybe 500 souls, but it looked prosperous enough. The buildings were a mix of adobe and wood, typical of New Mexico territory. A church steeple rose above the other structures, white against the blue sky. Ryder guided his horse down the main street, which was busy with afternoon traffic. People looked at them as they passed, curious about the woman riding double with Ryder Kane. Julia tried not to feel self-conscious about it. "The hotel is up here," Ryder said. "Mrs. Chen runs it. She is particular about her guests, but if I vouch for you, she will have a room available." Mrs. Chen came here from San Francisco about 10 years back. Her husband was killed by Apache raiders, but she decided to stay. She is tough as nails and makes the best dumplings you ever tasted. He stopped in front of a 2-story building with a sign that read Desert Rose Hotel in neat letters. Ryder dismounted first, then helped Julia down. Her legs were stiff from the ride and she stumbled slightly as her feet hit the ground. Ryder steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "You all right? Just been a long day. About to get easier." He tied his horse to the hitching post and gestured toward the hotel entrance. "Come on. Let me introduce you." The interior of the hotel was surprisingly cool and pleasant, with whitewashed walls and colorful woven rugs on the floor. A small Chinese woman appeared from a back room, her dark hair streaked with gray and pulled back in a tight bun. Her face was lined but kind. "Ryder Kane," she said, her English accented but clear. "You bring trouble to my hotel." "Just the opposite, Mrs. Chen. This is Miss Julia Edwards. She is Thomas Edwards's sister, come from St. Louis. Her stagecoach broke down outside town and she needs a room for the night, maybe longer." Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "Thomas's sister. I heard he had family back east. I was very sorry about Thomas. He was a good man. Helped me fix my roof last winter, would not take payment." "That sounds like Thomas," Julia said, her throat tight. "You need room. I have one second floor, faces the street. Clean sheets, good bed. $3 a week, meals included if you eat with everyone else in the dining room. $5 if you want privacy." $3 sounds fine, Julia said, "though I will need to access my brother's property before I can pay you. You are Thomas's sister. I trust you for it." Mrs. Chen pulled a key from a hook behind the small desk. "Room 4, you have bags." "They are still with the stagecoach. Pete Foster went back to town for a new wheel. Pete will bring them when he comes. Until then, I can lend you a nightdress and washing things." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. That is very kind." The older woman waved off the gratitude. "We take care of each other out here. It is the only way to survive." She handed Julia the key. "Dinner is at 6 o'clock. Do not be late. I do not keep food warm for stragglers. Julia took the key and turned to Ryder. Thank you for everything. I would have been in serious trouble if you had not come along. Happy to help. He tipped his hat. I will let Samuel Prescott know you are in town. He will probably want to meet with you tomorrow to discuss the store. You know Mr. Prescott well enough. He is honest if a bit stiff. He will treat you fairly. Ryder hesitated, then added, if you need anything at all, I work at the Fletcher Ranch about 2 miles north of town. Anyone can tell you how to find it. Do not hesitate to ask for help, Miss Edwards. The frontier is not kind to women alone. I am beginning to understand that, Julia said, but I do not want to impose on your kindness any further. It is not an imposition. It is just being neighborly. With that, he touched his hat brim once more and left, his boots making soft sounds on the wooden floor. Mrs. Chen watched him go, then looked at Julia with knowing eyes. That one is a good man, hard worker, does not drink too much, does not gamble, does not visit the girls at the saloon. In a town like this, that makes him rare. Julia felt her cheeks warm. I am sure he is very respectable. Respectable and handsome. If I were 30 years younger and not already married to a ghost, I would set my cap at him. Mrs. Chen smiled. But you are tired. Go rest. I will send up washing water. The room was small but clean, as promised. A narrow bed with a simple quilt, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, a small table with a chair, and a wardrobe that looked sturdy if plain. The window overlooked the main street, and Julia stood there for a moment, watching the life of the town pass below. Men on horseback, women with shopping baskets, children chasing a dog. It was so different from St. Louis, where everything had felt closed in and predetermined. She sat on the bed, testing the mattress. It was firm but comfortable. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to truly relax, to let down her guard. She thought about the men who had threatened her, about Ryder Kane appearing like something out of a dime novel, about the long road that had led her here. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, there was a soft knock at the door. Julia rose, still groggy, and opened it to find a young Mexican girl holding a pitcher of steaming water and a folded nightdress. From Mrs. Chen, the girl said shyly, for washing. Thank you. Julia took the items and the girl scurried away. The warm water felt like heaven on her dusty skin. Julia washed her face, her hands, her arms, feeling the grime of travel sluice away. She had just finished when there was another knock, this one more forceful. Miss Edwards. A man's voice, unfamiliar. Julia opened the door cautiously to find a tall, thin man in his 50s, wearing a suit that was too heavy for the climate. His face was pinched, his expression serious. I am Samuel Prescott, he said without preamble. Ryder Kane told me you had arrived. I thought we should speak immediately about your brother's affairs. Of course. Please come in. Julia stepped back, then realized the impropriety of inviting a man into her room. Actually, perhaps we should speak downstairs. The hotel has a small parlor. That would be more appropriate. Prescott's tone suggested he approved of her propriety. They settled in the parlor, which was empty at this hour. Prescott wasted no time. Your brother owned a 1/3 stake in my general store. The other 2/3 are mine. Since his death, I have been running the business alone, but it is too much for one person. I need a partner, or I need to buy out Thomas's share. What is the share worth? Julia asked. The store generates about $300 profit per month. 1/3 of that would be $100. However, the property itself, the inventory, the building, all of that has value too. I would estimate Thomas's share of the total worth to be around $2,000. Julia's mind reeled. $2,000 was more money than she had ever imagined having. That is a considerable sum. It is. I can pay you $1,000 now and the rest over the next year if you are willing to sell your share to me. Or if you prefer, you could stay and work the store as your brother did and collect your share of the profits. I do not know anything about running a general store. Thomas did not either when he started. He learned. Prescott leaned back, studying her. But I will be frank, Miss Edwards. This is hard country, especially for women on their own. You have no family here, no connections, no protection. Taking the money and returning east might be the wiser choice. And yet here I am, Julia said quietly. I did not come all this way to turn around and go back. Why did you come? Beyond the inheritance, I mean. Julia considered the question. Because there was nothing for me in St. Louis. Because I am tired of scraping by on pennies, of being at the mercy of others. Because I want something of my own, even if it is hard to get. Prescott nodded slowly. I can respect that. But respect does not change reality. You will need to think carefully about what you want to do. How long do I have to decide? Take a week. Come by the store, see what is involved. Then we will talk again. He stood, preparing to leave. One more thing. Your brother had a small house at the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just 2 rooms, but it is yours now. The deed is in my office. You can move in whenever you like. Thank you, Mr. Prescott. After he left, Julia sat in the parlor trying to process everything. A share in a business, a house. More money than she had ever had. It was overwhelming and terrifying and exciting all at once. Dinner that evening was a communal affair in the hotel's dining room. Julia sat at a long table with the other guests, mostly men passing through on business, and ate Mrs. Chen's excellent beef stew with fresh bread. The men were polite but curious, asking questions about where she was from and what brought her to Hot Springs. Julia answered vaguely, not wanting to share her business with strangers. As she was finishing her meal, Ryder Kane appeared in the doorway. He had cleaned up since the afternoon, his face freshly shaved, his clothes brushed free of dust. Several of the women at the table noticed him, their eyes lingering. "Miss Edwards," he said, approaching her table, "I hope I am not interrupting your supper. I was just finishing. I brought your bags. Pete made it back about an hour ago. He left them at the livery, and I figured I would save you the walk." "That is very kind of you." Julia rose, aware of the eyes watching them. "Are they outside?" "Yes, madam. I will carry them up to your room if that is all right." They went out to the street where Ryder had left her carpetbag and small trunk beside his horse. He hefted them both with ease and followed her upstairs. Julia unlocked her room and he set the bags inside the door. "There you are. Everything you own, safe and sound. Thank you again. You have been so helpful. I feel like I am constantly in your debt." Ryder smiled and it transformed his face, softening the hard edges. "No debt, just neighbors helping neighbors. That is how it works out here. Still, I would like to repay you somehow. Tell you what, tomorrow is Sunday. There is a church social after services. Good food, music, dancing. Come with me. It will give you a chance to meet people, make some connections in town. That is worth more than money out here." Julia hesitated. "I am not sure that would be proper. People might get the wrong idea." "People already have ideas. You rode into town on my horse. Might as well give them something real to talk about." His tone was teasing, but his eyes were serious. "Besides, you need friends, Miss Edwards. A single woman in a frontier town, she needs all the friends she can get." He was right, Julia knew. Propriety was a luxury she could not afford right now. "All right, what time?" "I will come by around 9 o'clock. Service starts at 10. He tipped his hat. "Sleep well, Miss Edwards." After he left, Julia unpacked her meager belongings. Everything she owned fit in one small trunk and one carpetbag. A few dresses, undergarments, stockings, her mother's Bible, the book of poetry, a daguerreotype of her family taken when she was 10 years old. She set the photograph on the small table and studied the faded image. Her mother, stern but beautiful. Her father, already ill though none of them knew it yet. Thomas, lanky and grinning. And herself, a gap-toothed child with ribbons in her hair, having no idea what the future held. That night, Julia lay in the unfamiliar bed and listened to the sounds of hot springs. Voices from the street, the tinny music of a piano from somewhere nearby, the occasional bark of a dog. She thought about Ryder Kane, about the easy confidence he carried, the way he had protected her without hesitation. She thought about the choice before her. Take the money and run, or stay and fight for something of her own. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, she dreamed of mountains and endless sky. The next morning dawned clear and bright, already warm even at 7 o'clock. Julia dressed in her best day dress, a deep blue cotton that was only slightly wrinkled from travel. She did what she could with her hair, pinning it up in a simple style, and joined the other hotel guests for breakfast. Mrs. Chen served thick slices of ham with eggs and potatoes, along with strong black coffee that cleared the cobwebs from Julia's mind. She ate alone at a corner table, watching the other diners and trying to get a sense of the town through its people. At 9 o'clock, as promised, Ryder arrived. He was dressed for church in a clean white shirt and dark trousers, his hair still damp from washing. He looked, Julia thought, quite handsome, then immediately chided herself for thinking such a thing. "Ready?" he asked. "As I will ever be." They walked to the church together, the morning sun already fierce. Ryder walked slowly, matching his stride to hers, pointing out landmarks as they went. The general store that was partly hers now, the blacksmith shop, the doctor's office, the marshal's office, currently occupied by a marshal named Tom Douglas, who Ryder described as fair but not particularly brave. The church was a simple white building with a bell tower and wooden pews. It was already nearly full when they arrived, and Julia felt every eye turn toward them as they entered. Ryder seemed unbothered by the attention, guiding her to a pew about halfway down the aisle. The service was led by a young minister named Reverend Matthews, who preached a sermon about Ruth and Naomi, about loyalty and faith in hard times. Julia found herself moved by his words, thinking about her own journey to this strange place, her own leap of faith. After the service, everyone moved outside to a grassy area beside the church where tables had been set up with food and drink. Children ran and played while the adults socialized. Ryder introduced Julia to what seemed like half the town. Names and faces blurred together. Ranchers and shopkeepers, miners and craftsmen, and their wives, sisters, and daughters. One woman stood out from the rest. Her name was Margaret Flynn, and she was perhaps 40, with red hair going gray and a forthright manner that Julia immediately appreciated. "So you are Thomas's sister," Margaret said, shaking Julia's hand firmly. "I run the dress shop in town. Your brother used to buy fabric from me sometimes, send it back east to you," he said. "He did," Julia confirmed, remembering the occasional packages that would arrive, always unexpected, always appreciated. "I still have a dress made from fabric he sent, green calico with white flowers. I remember that bolt. Thomas had good taste." Margaret glanced at Ryder, who had moved off to talk with a group of ranchers. "He is a good man, that one. You could do worse." "We are just friends," Julia said quickly. "He helped me when I was in trouble, that is all." "That is how it starts," Margaret said with a knowing smile. "My husband rescued me from a flash flood 20 years ago. Been married 18 years come October. These frontier courtships, they tend to be practical first, romantic second, but they work out all the same." Julia did not know what to say to that, so she changed the subject. Mr. Prescott told me I might work at the general store, but I do not know if I am suited for it. Are you suited for going back east? No, not anymore. Then you will make yourself suited for the store. Women out here, we do what needs doing whether we are suited for it or not. Margaret patted her arm. Come by my shop this week. We will talk. I think we will be good friends. The social continued through the afternoon. There was music from a fiddle and a guitar, and couples danced in the grass. Ryder asked Julia to dance, and though she protested that she did not know the steps, he assured her they were simple. They danced, and Julia found herself laughing for the first time in months as Ryder guided her through the unfamiliar patterns. He was a good dancer, light on his feet for a man of his size and patient with her mistakes. You are a natural, he said as the dance ended. You are a liar, but a kind one. Julia was breathless, her face flushed from exertion and the heat. They found shade under a cottonwood tree and drank cool lemonade provided by the church ladies. Ryder told her about the Fletcher ranch where he worked, about the cattle they raised, the horses they broke. He spoke about the land with real affection, and Julia found herself enjoying his stories. How did you end up in Hot Springs? She asked. Long story. The short version is I grew up in Texas, got tired of the family ranch and all the drama that came with it, and headed north looking for something different. Found work at Fletcher's place about 5 years ago. Good boss, good pay, good land. I have stayed ever since. You think you will stay permanently? I might. I have been saving money, thinking about buying some land of my own. There is good grazing country north of here, not too expensive if you know where to look. Maybe in another year or two, I will have enough to start my own spread. Nothing big, just enough to make a living. There was something appealing about his dream, the simplicity of it. A man building something for himself through hard work and patience. As the afternoon wore on, people began to drift away, heading home for Sunday dinners. Ryder walked Julia back to the hotel, taking a longer route that led past the small house that had been Thomas's. It was a modest adobe structure with a flat roof and 2 small windows. The door was painted blue, and there was a tiny garden out front, now overgrown with weeds. This is yours now, Ryder said. Pete Foster's wife, Annie, has the key. She has been keeping an eye on the place since Thomas passed. Julia studied the house, trying to imagine her brother living here. It looks lonely. Most houses do without people in them. It will feel different once you move in, bring your own things, make it yours. Do you think I should stay? Julia asked suddenly. Everyone keeps warning me how hard it is for women alone out here, how dangerous. Maybe I should take Mr. Prescott's offer, take the money and go back east. Ryder was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the distant mountains. I think you should do what feels right to you, but I will say this. Every person in Hot Springs, they came here for a reason. They were running from something or chasing something, same as you. This town is built on second chances. If you want one, you will find it here. Will it be easy? No, but nothing worth having ever is. They stood there in silence, the afternoon sun painting everything gold. Julia felt something shift inside her, a decision crystallizing. I am going to stay, she said. At least for now. I am going to learn the store business, make a go of it, and if it does not work out well, at least I will know I tried. Ryder smiled. Good, I was hoping you would say that. Why? Because Hot Springs could use more people like you, people with courage, he paused. And because I would like to see you again, and that would be hard if you moved back to Missouri. Julia felt her heart skip. You would like to see me again? I would, if that is all right with you. It is all right with me, Julia said softly. They looked at each other and something passed between them, a recognition, a possibility. Then Ryder cleared his throat and stepped back. I should get going. Early start tomorrow, and the cattle do not care if I stayed up late. He tipped his hat. But I will see you soon, Miss Edwards. You can count on that." Julia watched him walk away, tall and sure in the golden light, and felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. The next morning, Julia presented herself at Prescott's General Store at 8 o'clock sharp. The store was already open, and Samuel Prescott was behind the counter, tallying figures in a ledger. "Miss Edwards, prompt. That is good." He closed the ledger. "Are you ready to learn the business?" "I am." For the next week, Julia learned everything there was to know about running a general store. She learned how to keep inventory, how to order supplies, how to price goods for sale. She learned which customers paid cash and which ran tabs, and which tabs were likely to be paid and which were not. She learned how to measure out flour and sugar, how to cut fabric to a customer's specifications, how to test the freshness of eggs. It was exhausting work, on her feet from dawn to dusk, but Julia found that she enjoyed it. She liked talking to the customers, learning their names and their stories. She liked the orderly nature of the work, the way everything had its place. And she liked that she was building something for herself, creating a life that was hers alone. Prescott was a demanding teacher, but a fair one. He corrected her mistakes without being harsh, and he seemed genuinely pleased when she showed aptitude for the work. "You have a head for figures," he told her on the third day. "That is rare. Most people struggle with the accounting side of things." "My father was a bookkeeper," Julia explained. "He taught me mathematics when I was young." "Good. That will serve you well." At the end of the week, Prescott made his offer official. "I would like you to stay on as a partner. We will split the profits according to our shares. You will work the store same as me. In time, when you have learned everything, we can split the duties so neither of us is here all the time. What do you say?" "I say yes," Julia replied without hesitation. They shook hands on it, and Julia felt a surge of pride. She was a businesswoman now, a property owner, someone with a stake in the world. That evening, she moved into Thomas's house. It took all of an hour to transfer her few possessions from the hotel. Margaret Flynn stopped by with fresh bread and a jar of preserves. Annie Foster, Pete's wife, brought cleaning supplies and helped Julia scrub the place from top to bottom. Mrs. Chen appeared with a pot of soup and some spare blankets. "You see," Mrs. Chen said as she was leaving, "this is how it works. We take care of each other." Julia stood in her new home that night, exhausted but satisfied. It was small and humble, but it was hers. She had a business, a house, friends. She was making a life. She thought of Ryder Kane, whom she had not seen since Sunday. He was probably busy with ranch work, but she found herself hoping he would stop by soon. She wanted to tell him about her decision, about the store, about everything. She wanted to see that smile again, hear his stories. As if summoned by her thoughts, there was a knock at the door. Julia opened it to find Ryder standing there, hat in hand, looking slightly uncertain in a way she had not seen before. "Evening, Miss Edwards. I hope I am not calling too late." "Not at all. Please come in." He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the small space. "Place looks good." "You have been busy." "Very busy. I have so much to tell you." And she did, the words tumbling out. About the store, about Prescott's offer, about her decision to stay and make a life in Hot Springs. Ryder listened with a smile, nodding in all the right places. When she finally ran out of breath, he said, "I am glad, really glad, so am I. It feels right being here. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I am where I am supposed to be." "I know that feeling." Ryder turned his hat in his hands. "I was wondering if you would like to go riding with me on Sunday. There is a place up in the hills I would like to show you. Beautiful country, good view of the valley." "I would like that very much." "Good. I will bring an extra horse, something gentle. We will make a day of it, bring a picnic." After he left, Julia found herself smiling for no particular reason. She prepared for bed in her new house, in her new life, and felt something she had almost forgotten. She felt happy. Sunday arrived bright and clear. Ryder appeared at Julia's door at mid-morning with 2 horses, his big chestnut and a smaller roan mare with a gentle eye. "This is Rosie," Ryder said, patting the mare's neck. "She belongs to the boss's daughter, but she is off at school in Santa Fe. Rosie needs exercise, and she is as steady as they come." Julia approached the mare cautiously. She had not ridden in years, not since she was a girl visiting her uncle's farm in Ohio. But Rosie stood patiently while Julia mounted, and once she was in the saddle, muscle memory took over. They rode out of town, heading east toward the mountains. The land rose gradually, the desert giving way to scrub grass and juniper trees. The air was cooler at the higher elevation, and Julia found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the ride. Ryder led them along a narrow trail that wound through the hills. He pointed out landmarks, told her about the wildlife in the area, deer and elk and the occasional bear. Julia listened and watched and felt herself falling a little bit in love with this wild, beautiful country. After about an hour, they reached a small plateau overlooking the valley. Hot Springs was visible below, a cluster of buildings surrounded by the vast expanse of the territory. The hot springs themselves sent up columns of steam that caught the sunlight. "This is one of my favorite spots," Ryder said, dismounting. "I come here sometimes when I need to think." They spread a blanket in the shade of a large boulder, and Ryder unpacked the lunch he had brought: fried chicken, fresh bread, apples, and a jar of water. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easily. Julia told him about St. Louis, about her life as a seamstress, about the man who had promised to marry her and then changed his mind. "His loss," Ryder said firmly. "Any man stupid enough to let you go does not deserve you." "That is kind of you to say." "It is true. You are smart, capable, brave enough to travel 1,000 miles to start over. That is rare." Julia felt her cheeks warm. "Tell me about Texas, about your family." Ryder's expression grew more guarded. "Not much to tell. My father owns a big ranch near San Antonio. 3 sons. I am the middle one. My older brother was going to inherit, my younger brother was the favorite, and I was just there. We did not see eye to eye on much. When I was 25, we had a falling out and I left. Have not been back since." "Do you miss them?" "Sometimes. Miss my mother mostly. She is a good woman, caught between my father and his pride." He shrugged. "But I made my choice. I wanted to build something on my own terms, not live in someone else's shadow." "I understand that. That is why I came here." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching a hawk circle overhead. Then Ryder said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That day I found you by the stagecoach. You had a gun and you were ready to use it. Where did you learn that kind of courage?" Julia considered the question. "I do not know if it was courage. Maybe just stubbornness. My father used to say I had a stubborn streak a mile wide. After he died, after Thomas left, I had to take care of myself. Nobody was going to do it for me, so I learned to be strong, to fight for what I needed. The gun was Thomas's idea. He sent it to me years ago, said every woman should know how to protect herself. Smart man, your brother, he was. I wish you had known him better. I think you two would have been friends." "I think so too." The afternoon stretched on, warm and peaceful. They talked about everything and nothing. About books they had read, places they wanted to see, dreams they had for the future. Julia found herself more relaxed than she had been in years, more herself. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Ryder said reluctantly, "We should head back. I do not want you riding in the dark." They packed up and mounted their horses for the ride back to town. As they rode, Julia felt Ryder glance at her several times, as if he wanted to say something but could not quite find the words. Finally, as hot springs came into view below them, he said, "Julia, I want you to know that I am not the kind of man who plays games. If I am interested in someone, I am honest about it." Julia's heart began to beat faster. "All right. I am interested in you, more than interested. I think you are remarkable, and if you are willing, I would like to court you properly. Take you to socials, call on you, see where this goes." Julia took a breath, her mind racing. Everything was happening so fast. She had been in Hot Springs less than 2 weeks, and already her entire life had changed. And now this man, this good, kind, handsome man, was asking to court her. "I would like that," she said. "Very much." Ryder's face lit up with a smile that made Julia's stomach flutter. "Yeah? Yeah." They looked at each other, and Julia saw in his eyes something that matched what she was feeling. A connection, deep and real. The beginning of something that could be extraordinary. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Julia worked at the store during the day, learning the business and building relationships with the customers. In the evenings, Ryder would often stop by, sometimes just for a few minutes, sometimes for longer visits. They would sit on the small bench outside her house and talk, as the desert cooled from the day's heat. On Sundays, they attended church together, and afterward would take rides into the countryside. Ryder showed her hidden canyons and ancient rock formations, taught her to identify plants and animal tracks. Julia felt herself falling in love not just with Ryder, but with the land itself, with this wild, harsh, beautiful place that was becoming home. The town began to accept their courtship as fact. People smiled when they saw them together, and Julia heard more than one person refer to Ryder as Julia's young man. It should have felt presumptuous, but instead it felt right. One evening in early October, as they sat outside Julia's house watching the stars emerge, Ryder said, "I found some land." Julia turned to him, excited. "You did? Where?" "About 5 miles north of here. 160 acres, good water, decent grazing. The owner is an old rancher named Holloway who is moving back east to live with his daughter. He wants $300 for it." "That is wonderful, Ryder. Do you have enough saved?" "Almost. Another month or two of work and I will have it." He looked at her, his expression serious. "I have been thinking about what comes after, about building a house, starting a herd, about the future. That all sounds good. It does. But I am realizing that I do not want to do it alone." He took her hand, his thumb rubbing gently over her knuckles. "Julia, I know we have not been courting long. By Eastern standards, this would be too fast. But out here, time works differently. When you know something is right, you do not wait around, and I know you are right. You are right for me." Julia's breath caught. "Ryder, I am not asking you yet. I want to do this properly, give you time to be sure, but I am telling you what is in my heart. I am falling in love with you, Julia Edwards, and I hope, you might be falling in love with me too." "I am," Julia whispered. "I am falling in love with you." Ryder leaned in and kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Julia felt like everything in her life had been leading to this moment. This man, this place, this future spreading out before them like the vast New Mexico sky. When they pulled apart, Ryder rested his forehead against hers. "I will buy that land. I will build us a house. And when it is ready, I am going to ask you to marry me properly with a ring and everything. And I am hoping you will say yes." "I am hoping I will too," Julia said, smiling through happy tears. The next month passed in a blur of work and planning. Ryder put down payment on the land and began the process of taking ownership. Julia continued learning the store business, and Prescott began to trust her with more responsibility, including ordering inventory and managing the books when he needed to be away. In early November, tragedy struck the town. A fire broke out in the livery stable, and several buildings caught flame before the townspeople could put it out. No one was killed, but Pete Foster was badly burned trying to save the horses, and the doctor said it would be weeks before he could work again. Annie Foster appeared at the store the next day, her face drawn with worry. "I do not know what to do, Miss Edwards. Pete cannot work and we have 3 children to feed. We have a little money saved, but not enough to last until he is healed." Julia did not hesitate. "You will work here. We need help with the heavy lifting anyway, and you know everyone in town. You will be perfect." "I cannot accept charity," Annie said, her pride showing. "It is not charity, it is a job. You will work, we will pay you. Mr. Prescott and I were just discussing hiring help anyway. You would be doing us a favor." Annie's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, truly." When Prescott arrived later that morning, Julia told him what she had done. She half expected him to be angry that she had made such a decision without consulting him, but instead he nodded approvingly. "Good thinking. Annie is a hard worker, and we do need the help. You are learning what it means to be part of a community, Miss Edwards." Julia felt a swell of pride. She was not just surviving in Hot Springs. She was thriving. That Sunday, Ryder took Julia to see his land. They rode out together, and Julia felt her excitement growing as they left town behind. The property was beautiful, with gently rolling hills, a creek that ran year-round, and views of the mountains in every direction. "I am going to build the house there," Ryder said, pointing to a slight rise that would give shelter from winter winds but still catch the breeze in summer. 3 rooms to start, with space to add on later when we need it." "When we need it," Julia repeated, loving the sound of those words. "You are very confident I am going to say yes when you ask me." "I am hopeful," Ryder corrected with a grin. "There is a difference." They spent the afternoon walking the property, making plans. Ryder talked about where he would put the barn, the corral, maybe a chicken coop if Julia wanted chickens. Julia talked about a garden, maybe some fruit trees if they could get them to grow in the harsh climate. "We could have a good life here," Ryder said as they stood on the rise where the house would be. "It will be hard work, no question, but it will be ours, something we built together." "I cannot think of anything I want more," Julia said honestly. As November turned to December, the weather grew colder, and the first snow dusted the mountains. Ryder began construction on the house, working on it every spare moment he had. Other men from town helped when they could, and Julia was touched by how the community rallied around them. This was what Margaret had meant about taking care of each other. In a place as harsh as the frontier, people had to work together to survive. On Christmas Eve, the whole town gathered at the church for a special service. Afterward, there was a social with food and music and gifts for the children. Julia had knitted scarves for several people, including Ryder, who looked genuinely touched by the gift. "I got you something too," he said, pulling a small wrapped package from his coat pocket. "It is not much, but I thought you might like it." Julia unwrapped it carefully to find a small wooden box, beautifully carved with a pattern of desert flowers. "Ryder, this is lovely. Did you make this?" "I did. Took me a while to get the flowers right. It is for keeping special things in. Letters, maybe, or keepsakes." Julia opened the box and found, nestled in soft cloth, a silver ring with a small turquoise stone. Her breath caught. "Now, before you say anything," Ryder said quickly, "this is not the proposal. That is coming later when the house is done, when I can do it right. But I wanted you to have this, to know that I am serious about us, about our future. It is a promise ring, I guess you would call it. A promise that I am yours and I am hoping you will be mine." Julia looked at the ring, then at Ryder, her eyes bright with emotion. "Help me put it on." Ryder took the ring from the box with slightly shaking hands and slid it onto her right hand. It fit perfectly, the turquoise catching the lamplight. "It is beautiful," Julia whispered. "Thank you." They kissed there in the churchyard with snow beginning to fall around them. and Julia thought she had never been happier in her entire life. Winter deepened, bringing cold nights and the occasional snowstorm. The store stayed busy with people stocking up on supplies, and Julia learned to manage the heavier work of winter, hauling wood for the stove, breaking ice from the water barrels, keeping inventory stocked despite the difficulty of getting shipments through in bad weather. Ryder worked on the house whenever weather permitted, and by late February it was nearly complete. Julia visited one Sunday to find him putting the final touches on the interior, building cabinets in the kitchen area. "What do you think?" he asked, wiping sawdust from his hands. Julia walked through the space, taking it all in. It was simple but well built, with solid walls and a good roof. The main room held a fireplace he had built from local stone, with a cooking area to one side and space for a table and chairs. A doorway led to a bedroom, good-sized and bright with a large window facing east. The third room was smaller, perfect for storage or maybe, someday, a nursery. "It is perfect," Julia said. "Truly perfect. Then I have a question to ask you." Ryder took her hand and led her to stand in front of the fireplace. He took a deep breath, and Julia realized he was nervous. "Julia Edwards, from the moment I met you broken down on that road, too stubborn and brave for your own good, I knew you were special. These past months, getting to know you, watching you build a life here, falling in love with you, they have been the best of my life. I want every day going forward to be with you. I want to build this life together, raise a family, grow old on this land. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife?" "Yes," Julia said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." Ryder whooped with joy and picked her up, spinning her around the empty room. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, and Julia felt like her heart might burst with happiness. "When?" she asked when they finally broke apart. "Whenever you want. Tomorrow, if you like, or we can wait, have a proper wedding with all the trimmings." "I do not need trimmings, but I would like to be married in the church with our friends there. Maybe in a month. That will give me time to finish a few things at the store, and for you to finish the house. A month it is." They announced their engagement the next day, and the town celebrated with them. Mrs. Chen insisted on making the wedding cake. Margaret Flynn offered to help Julia make a wedding dress. Even Samuel Prescott seemed pleased, telling Julia she had chosen well. The next month was a whirlwind of preparation. Julia worked with Margaret to create a simple but beautiful dress in cream-colored silk that Margaret had been saving for a special occasion. Annie Foster and several other women helped prepare food for the reception. Ryder finished the house and began furnishing it, building a bed frame and a table with matching chairs, buying what else they needed from the store at cost. On the last Saturday in March, 1879, Julia Edwards married Ryder Kane in the Little White Church in Hot Springs, New Mexico Territory. The church was packed with people from town, all of them dressed in their Sunday best. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony, speaking about faith and love and commitment. Julia walked down the aisle wearing her new dress with her mother's wedding band on a chain around her neck. Now joined by Ryder's turquoise ring moved to her left hand. Ryder waited at the altar in a new suit, his eyes bright with emotion as he watched her approach. They said their vows clearly and firmly, promising to love and honor each other, to face whatever came together. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Ryder kissed her sweetly, and the church erupted in applause. The reception was held in the church hall, with music and dancing and more food than Julia had ever seen. She and Ryder danced the first dance, and Julia felt like she was floating. This man was her husband now. This life was theirs to build together. As the evening wore on, Julia found herself talking with Mrs. Chen, who had tears in her eyes. You remind me of myself many years ago, coming to a new place, starting over. It is not easy, but you are strong. You will build a good life. Thank you for everything you have done for me, Julia said, hugging the older woman. I do not know what I would have done without your kindness when I first arrived. We take care of each other. Mrs. Chen repeated the phrase that had become so familiar. That is what makes us survive. Finally, as the sun was setting, Ryder and Julia left the party to ride out to their new home. Friends had gone ahead to light lamps and lay a fire in the fireplace, and when they arrived, the house glowed with welcoming light. Ryder carried Julia over the threshold, both of them laughing. He set her down gently, and they stood together in their home, their life together just beginning. Happy? Ryder asked, pulling her close. Happier than I ever imagined I could be, Julia answered truthfully. They made love that night for the first time, gentle and tender, learning each other in the firelight. Julia felt safe and loved in a way she had never experienced before. Ryder was patient and caring, and afterward, as they lay tangled together under quilts, Julia thought about how far she had come from that broken stagecoach, from the frightened woman facing an uncertain future. "What are you thinking?" Ryder asked, running his fingers through her loose hair. "About destiny. About how everything had to happen exactly as it did to lead me here. If the wheel had not broken, if those men had not found me, if you had not come along when you did, none of this would have happened." "I do not believe in destiny," Ryder said, "but I believe in lucky chances. And I believe in brave women who take those chances and run with them. You could have sold your share of the store and gone back east. You could have stayed safe and comfortable. But you did not. You chose this life. That was not destiny, that was courage." Julia considered this. Maybe it was both. "Maybe," Ryder agreed, kissing her forehead. "Either way, I am grateful for it." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the fire burning low, and outside the vast New Mexico night was alive with stars. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Julia continued working at the store 3 days a week, while Ryder worked at the Fletcher Ranch and slowly built up their own small herd with the money he had saved. They fell into a rhythm, learning to live together, to navigate the small conflicts that arose, to build a partnership. In May, Ryder bought their first cattle, 10 cows and a young bull, using most of his remaining savings. It was a start, he said. In a few years, with good management, they could have a substantial herd. Julia discovered she was pregnant in June. She had suspected for a few weeks but waited to be sure before telling Ryder. When she finally did, over dinner one evening, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He whooped with joy, picked her up carefully, and spun her around their kitchen. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Julia asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. Happy does not begin to cover it. Terrified, excited, grateful, all of it. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "When?" "The doctor thinks late January or early February." "Winter baby. We will need to stock up on firewood, make sure we have everything we need before the snows come." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Julia continued working at the store until she grew too large to comfortably stand for long hours, at which point Annie Foster took over more of her duties. Samuel Prescott was understanding, telling Julia to take whatever time she needed. Ryder became increasingly protective as her due date approached. He insisted on accompanying her anywhere she needed to go, worried about her riding or walking too far. Julia found it endearing, if occasionally frustrating. In late January, on a night when snow was falling thick and fast, Julia went into labor. Ryder rode through the storm to fetch the doctor and Mrs. Chen, who served as the town's midwife for complicated births. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. But finally, as dawn was breaking over the snow-covered land, their son was born. He was tiny and red and perfect, with a shock of dark hair in his father's eyes. Ryder held him with shaking hands, tears running down his face. "He is beautiful," he whispered. "Julia, he is so beautiful." They named him Thomas, after Julia's brother. Thomas Kane, their first child, born in February 1880 in a small house on the New Mexico frontier. The first months of motherhood were exhausting but joyful. Julia learned to nurse the baby, to soothe him when he cried, to function on broken sleep. Ryder helped as much as he could, walking the floor with Thomas in the middle of the night so Julia could rest, changing diapers, doing anything needed. The community rallied around them. Margaret Flynn brought meals. Annie Foster stopped by to help with washing. Mrs. Chen appeared regularly with advice and herbal remedies for everything from colic to diaper rash. As Thomas grew, Julia returned to work at the store part-time, bringing the baby with her in a basket. Customers loved seeing him, and more than one woman offered to hold him while Julia worked. It was not conventional, but nothing about life on the frontier was conventional. In the spring of 1881, Ryder made a decision. "I am quitting the Fletcher Ranch," he told Julia one evening. "Our herd has grown enough that I can make a living from our own place. It is time to fully commit to building our ranch." Julia supported his decision, though it meant tightening their budget. They would make it work. They always did. That year, they increased their herd to 40 head of cattle. Ryder built a proper barn and expanded the corral. Julia planted a large vegetable garden and bought chickens. Slowly, steadily, they built their ranch into something real and profitable. In 1882, their second child was born, a daughter they named Rose, with her mother's dark hair and delicate features. Thomas, now a toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help take care of her. The years passed in a blur of work and growth. The ranch prospered, the herd growing to over 100 head. Ryder hired a ranch hand to help with the heavy work. Julia continued her partnership with the store, though as the children grew, she spent more time at home. In 1884, their third child was born, another son they named James. He was a quiet baby, watchful and serious from the start. By now, Julia and Ryder had expanded the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper dining room. The children grew healthy and strong, raised on fresh air and hard work. Thomas showed an aptitude for ranching, following his father everywhere. Rose was bright and curious, always asking questions about how things worked. James was gentle and kind, with a special way with animals. In 1887, disaster struck when a harsh winter killed nearly a third of their herd. It was devastating financially, and Julia watched Ryder struggle with the loss, blaming himself for not doing more to protect the cattle. But they rebuilt, taking out a small loan from the bank and slowly building the herd back up. Through it all, their love remained strong. On their 10th anniversary, Ryder surprised Julia by taking her back to the plateau where they had first admitted their feelings. They left the children with Margaret for the afternoon and rode out together, older now but still very much in love. 10 years, Ryder said as they looked out over the valley. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday we were standing in that church getting married. Other times it feels like we have always been together." "I know what you mean," Julia said, leaning against him. "Ryder, I need to tell you something." "All right. I am pregnant again." Ryder turned to look at her, surprise and joy spreading across his face. "Really? Julia, that is wonderful." "I thought you might say we have enough children," Julia admitted. "There is no such thing as enough when it comes to you and me," Ryder said, kissing her soundly. Their fourth child, a daughter they named Grace, was born in early 1888. She had red hair like no one else in the family and a temperament to match. She was fierce and determined from the start, and Julia often joked that Grace would either rule the world or burn it down trying. By 1890, the ranch was thriving. They owned over 200 head of cattle, several good horses, and had expanded their property by buying an adjacent parcel. Thomas, now 10, was a capable ranch hand. Rose, 8, helped her mother with the younger children and the house. James, 6, had a way with the horses that amazed even Ryder. And Grace, too, was into everything, a whirlwind of energy and mischief. Julia still worked at the store 1 day a week, more to maintain her partnership than because they needed the money. Samuel Prescott was in his 70s now and talking about retirement. He had offered to sell Julia his share of the business, which she and Ryder were seriously considering. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, their children playing in the yard, Ryder took Julia's hand. "You remember that day I found you by the broken stagecoach?" he asked. "Every detail," Julia said. "I was terrified. About those men, about being alone, about what I was going to do with my life. I took one look at you, standing there with that little pistol, too stubborn to show fear, and I thought, that is a woman worth knowing. I had no idea then that you would become my whole world." Julia squeezed his hand. "The frontier was cruel to single women. It tried to break me before I even really got here, but you made sure I never faced it alone. From that very first day, you were there, protecting me, supporting me, loving me. You gave me a life I never dreamed I could have." "We gave each other that life," Ryder corrected. "I was just drifting before you, working at someone else's ranch, saving money for some vague future. You gave me purpose. You gave me a reason to build something real and lasting." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Thomas show James how to rope a fence post while Rose tried to keep Grace from eating dirt. It was an ordinary evening, nothing special, and yet it was everything. "You ever regret it?" Julia asked. "Settling down so young, having children right away, all of it." "Not for 1 second," Ryder said firmly. "This life, this family, it is everything I ever wanted and more than I knew I needed. What about you? Any regrets?" Julia thought about the girl she had been, traveling alone across the frontier, frightened and uncertain. She thought about the woman she had become, a wife, a mother, a businesswoman, a rancher. She thought about the community they had built around them, the friends who had become family, the land they had made their own. "No regrets," she said. "Not a single one." As if to prove it, Grace toddled over and climbed into her mother's lap, sticky-faced and grinning. Julia held her daughter close and met Ryder's eyes over the child's red hair. In that look passed all the love, trust, and partnership they had built over their years together. In 1892, Julia officially bought out Samuel Prescott's share of the general store. She hired Annie Foster as full-time manager, allowing Julia to focus more on the ranch and her family while still maintaining her business interests. It was the best of both worlds, and Julia took pride in being one of the few female business owners in the territory. That same year, New Mexico established better schools, and a small schoolhouse was built just a mile from their ranch. Thomas, Rose, and James attended regularly, learning reading, writing, and arithmetic from a young teacher named Miss Patterson. Julia made sure her children understood the value of education, something she had been fortunate enough to receive from her own parents. Grace started school in 1894, and Julia found herself with more free time than she had enjoyed in years. She used it to become more involved in town affairs, joining the church ladies group and helping organize various community events. She also began teaching some of the younger women in town about business and accounting, sharing the knowledge she had gained. In 1895, Ryder turned 45, and they threw a big party at the ranch. It seemed like half the territory showed up, friends they had made over the years, people whose lives had intersected with theirs. Mrs. Chen was there, now in her 70s but still sharp as a tack. Margaret Flynn came with her husband, their own children now grown and starting families. Pete and Annie Foster, their children nearly adults. The Reverend Matthews, who had married them and baptized all their children. As Julia looked around at the gathering, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. They had built more than a ranch or a business. They had built a community, a life rich with friendship and love. In 1897, Thomas, now 17, started courting a neighbor's daughter, a sweet girl named Emma who was 16. Julia watched her oldest son experiencing his first love and remembered her own courtship with Ryder, the intensity of new feelings, the excitement of building a future together. "He is too young," Ryder grumbled one evening after Thomas and Emma had spent the afternoon walking by the creek. "He is exactly the age you were when you left Texas," Julia pointed out, "and only a year younger than I was when I came to Hot Springs. That is different." "How?" Ryder opened his mouth, closed it, then laughed. "All right, you have a point, but he is still my son and she is still too young. They are both good kids, and Emma's parents are respectable people. Whatever happens will happen at the right time." As always, Ryder trusted Julia's judgment. Thomas and Emma continued courting through the next year, their relationship deepening. In 1899, shortly after Thomas's 19th birthday, he asked Emma to marry him, and she accepted. The wedding was held at the same church where Julia and Ryder had married 20 years earlier. Julia cried happy tears as she watched her son pledge his life to another person, beginning his own journey. Ryder held her hand throughout the ceremony, and when she looked at him, she saw his own eyes were damp. "When did we get old enough to have a married son?" he whispered. "We are not old," Julia whispered back. "Just experienced." Thomas and Emma built a small house on the far edge of the ranch property. Thomas continued working with Ryder, learning everything there was to know about running a ranch. Emma helped Julia with the house and the younger children when needed. It was good to have family close, to see the cycle continuing. In 1900, as the new century dawned, the whole family gathered on their porch to watch the sun set on the last day of the 1800s. Thomas and Emma were there, newlyweds still giddy with love. Rose, now 18, was teaching at the same schoolhouse she had attended as a child. James, 16, was already one of the best horsemen in the territory. And Grace, 12, was still a force of nature, talking about becoming a doctor someday, something Julia fully supported despite the raised eyebrows such ambition caused. "Can you believe it?" Julia said to Ryder as they stood watching the sunset, their children and Emma around them. "A new century. Do you think it will be better than the last one?" "I do not know about the whole century," Ryder said, putting his arm around her waist, "but I know our part of it will be good. As long as we are together, as long as we have this family, this land, this life we built, everything else will work itself out." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of orange and purple and red, Julia leaned into her husband's embrace and thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a broken stagecoach wheel to this moment, spanning more than 20 years, she had built a life beyond her wildest imaginings. The frontier had been cruel, just as everyone warned. It had tested her in ways she never expected. But Ryder had been right there beside her from that very first day, making sure she never faced those challenges alone. Together, they had built something lasting and beautiful. In 1901, Emma gave birth to Julia and Ryder's first grandchild, a boy they named after Ryder. Julia held her grandson for the first time and felt the circle completing, a new generation beginning. She looked at Ryder holding the baby, his face soft with wonder, and felt her heart swell with love. That evening, after all the excitement had died down and they were alone in their bedroom, Ryder pulled Julia close. "A grandfather," he said, still sounding amazed. "I am a grandfather." "You are a wonderful grandfather," Julia corrected. "Just like you are a wonderful father and a wonderful husband." "I had a good teacher," Ryder said, kissing her forehead. "You taught me how to be all those things, Julia. Before you, I was just drifting. You gave me a purpose, a reason to build something lasting." "We built it together," Julia said, the same thing they had said to each other countless times over the years, because it was true. Everything they had created as partners, each supporting the other through good times and bad. As they lay in bed that night, Julia thought back to that frightened woman on the side of the road, alone and vulnerable. She had come so far from that moment. She had built businesses, raised children, created a home and a legacy. And through it all, Ryder had been there, her partner, her love, her home. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Rose married a teacher from Santa Fe in 1903, and they settled in town where he taught at the growing school. James took over more of the ranch work as Ryder began to slow down, his joints aching more in the cold weather. Grace, true to her word, went away to study medicine, one of only a handful of women in her class. By 1905, Julia and Ryder were grandparents 3 times over, with Thomas and Emma's second child, Rose's first, and another on the way. The ranch continued to prosper, now run mainly by Thomas and James, though Ryder still spent his days overseeing things, unable to fully step away from the work that had defined so much of his life. Julia had fully retired from the store, selling her share to Annie Foster's daughter, who ran it with the same care and attention that Julia had brought to it. She spent her days tending her garden, visiting with grandchildren, and working on her memoirs, which Grace had encouraged her to write. One evening in spring 1907, as Julia and Ryder sat on their porch watching yet another sunset, Ryder said, "I have been thinking about that day we met, 29 years ago this August. I think about it often," Julia admitted. "How different my life would have been if that wheel had not broken, if you had not come along when you did. Everything would have been different. You might have made it to town, met Prescott, sold your share of the store and gone back east, married someone respectable and boring." Julia laughed. "You are plenty respectable, maybe now, but back then, a drifting ranch hand with no prospects and a chip on his shoulder, your friends in St. Louis would have been horrified. Good thing I did not care what they thought then, and I certainly do not care now." Julia reached over and took his hand, noting how weathered it had become, marked by decades of hard work. Her own hands were the same, no longer the soft hands of a seamstress but the capable hands of a rancher's wife. "I made the right choice, Ryder Kane. I would make it again in a heartbeat." Even knowing how hard it would be. The winters, the struggles, nearly losing the ranch more than once, especially knowing all that. Because I also know how good it turned out. Look at what we built. Not just this ranch, not just our business, but our family. 4 children, all grown and happy and successful, grandchildren who will carry on our legacy, friends who became family, a community that supported us through everything. That is worth every struggle. Ryder squeezed her hand. "You know what I am most proud of?" "What?" "That I got to watch you become the woman you were always meant to be. When I found you that day, you were strong and brave, but you did not really know it yet. You did not know what you were capable of. And I got to watch you discover it, watch you grow into your power. That has been the greatest privilege of my life." Julia felt tears prick her eyes. Even after all these years, Ryder could still move her with his words. I love you. I have loved you since that day you made me hold tight to your waist on that horse ride into town. I have loved you through everything that came after, and I will love you until my last breath. And beyond that, Ryder added softly, love like ours does not end just because bodies wear out. It goes on. In our children, our grandchildren, everyone whose lives we touched. They sat in silence as the sun finished its descent, painting the sky in familiar shades of glory. Grace appeared then, home for a visit between her medical training, and came to sit with them. Tell me the story, she said, as she had said countless times growing up. Tell me about how you met. So Julia told it again, the story Grace and her siblings had heard many times but never tired of. The broken stagecoach, the dangerous men, Ryder appearing like a hero from a novel. The ride into town, the beginning of their courtship, the building of their life together. Grace listened with rapt attention, same as always. I want a love like that, she said when Julia finished. Something real and lasting and strong enough to weather anything. You will find it, Julia said confidently. When you are ready, when the time is right, you will find someone who makes you want to build a life together. Someone who sees your strength and loves you for it, not in spite of it. How will I know when I find it? Julia and Ryder exchanged a look, communicating without words the way they had learned to over decades of marriage. You will know, Ryder said. Trust me, you will know. The years rolled on, gentle now, filled with the simple pleasures of a life well lived. Mornings sitting on the porch with coffee, watching the sunrise. Afternoons visiting with children and grandchildren. Evenings together, talking or reading or just being in each other's company. In 1910, they celebrated their 31st wedding anniversary with a large party. It seemed like everyone they had ever known came to celebrate with them. There was music and dancing and so much food. Julia danced with Ryder under the New Mexico stars, moving slowly now but still together, still in love. 31 years, Julia marveled. Where did the time go? Into this, Ryder said, gesturing at their family and friends around them. Into building all of this. Time well spent, I would say. The best possible way to spend it, Julia agreed. They continued dancing, and Julia rested her head on Ryder's shoulder, feeling his heart beat steady and strong. She thought about the scared young woman she had been, traveling alone into unknown territory. She thought about the cowboy who had saved her, not just from danger but from a life of loneliness and struggle. She thought about every moment between then and now, the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and setbacks, all of it woven together into the rich tapestry of their life. The frontier had been cruel to single women. That was a fact, one Julia had experienced firsthand. But Ryder had made sure she never faced it alone. From that very first day, he had been there, protecting her, supporting her, loving her. And she had done the same for him, giving him purpose and family and a reason to build something lasting. Together, they had carved out a life from harsh land and hard work. They had raised children who were good and strong and kind. They had built businesses and friendships and a legacy that would outlast them both. They had loved each other through everything, their bond growing stronger with each passing year. As the party continued around them, as their children danced and their grandchildren played, Julia looked into Ryder's eyes and saw her entire life reflected there. The past, present, and future, all tied together by the love they shared. Thank you, she whispered. For what? Ryder asked. For appearing that day when I needed you most. For choosing me. For building this life with me. For every moment we have had together. I should be thanking you, Ryder said. You took a chance on a ranch hand with nothing but hope and determination. You built a business, raised our children, made our house a home. You made me a better man than I ever thought I could be." "We made each other better," Julia said. "That is what love does. It makes us more than we could be alone." They kissed there under the stars, surrounded by the life they had built, and it was perfect. Not because everything had been easy, not because they had never struggled, but because they had faced it all together, and that had made all the difference. The party went late into the night, filled with laughter and music and love. When it finally ended and the last guests departed, Julia and Ryder stood on their porch, looking out at the land that had become home. "Not bad," Ryder said, his arm around Julia's waist. "For a couple of kids who did not know what they were doing." "We figured it out as we went," Julia replied, leaning into him. "That is all anyone can do." They stood there in the warm New Mexico night, the stars brilliant overhead, and felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. They had survived and thrived on the harsh frontier. They had built something beautiful and lasting. They had loved and been loved in return. And as they finally went inside their home, the house they had built with their own hands and filled with their own family, they knew that whatever time they had left, they would face it the same way they had faced everything else. Together, hand in hand, heart to heart, until the very end. The end.